Hi everyone, and welcome to another Practical Inclusion we're now in October. Thank you for joining us today, and again to those who are watching on the replay, thanks for tuning in and watching these. By acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which both Ainslee and I broadcast from today, which is the lands of the Wadawurrung people, and pay my respect to their elders past, present and future. And I'd also like to pay my respects to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders who are tuning in live or on the replay. Really kind of excited today because I get to introduce yet another friend of mine on this platform, which has been such a positive thing to come from this. Ainslee has been doing some incredible work out of Geelong, just like me, but in the accessibility space, in holistic accessibility. I'm going to let Ainslee introduce herself as I always do, but just before I do, many of you engaged with my post last week around my interaction with my neighbour. And as much as that conversation with him was awkward and confronting, it's not unusual, and it was really great to see the responses from all of you about that conversation and the work that we're all doing to try and educate people and prevent those types of conversations happening. So if you didn't catch on, if you didn't catch up with that post, my neighbour had a really awkward conversation with me about my sexuality. Interestingly, this morning he did walk past again and gave me his usual salute that he gives me every morning, so not all is lost. But yeah, really thank you to all of you who engaged with that and for the messages that you sent me and for the education that you're doing. Ainslee, I would love you to tell us your story and introduce yourself to everybody watching today, and tell us a bit about the work that you do and how you got here, why you are doing this particular type of work.
Thanks for having me on, Bree. Hi, I'm Ainslee Hooper and I own Ainslee Hooper Consulting. I offer a range of bespoke consulting services to help businesses overcome invisible barriers to accessibility, holistic accessibility, as I call it. So basically, the reason why I started my business is that, having a disability myself, I started to notice that there were gaps in the disability sector in regards to services to people with disabilities, and I then came to a realisation that these invisible barriers don't just exist in the disability sector, they actually exist in the wider community. So therefore, that's why I offer a range of consulting services that are bespoke. I tailor them to the business. So I have a range of customers that I consult for.
Fantastic. And why, what's driven you personally to do this work?
So basically for myself, so as I said, I've got a disability. I was born with a disability, and throughout my life, I would say, so, for the first, I'm 42 now. So for the first half of my life, it was all pretty cruisy, just lived my life. And then when I was in my early 20s, I had a health issue, which was due to negligence of a hospital, and that particular health issue became a life-changing thing for me. So I had to start using disability services that I hadn't had to use previously, and it was because of that and those interactions that I had with those disability service providers, and then finding out that these things weren't just my experiences, they're actually experiences that happen to other people. That's where I really wanted to help change that. I also studied to be an anthropologist, and I started studying to be an anthropologist whilst I was in hospital due to those health issues. So I had quite a long time to study that, and through studying anthropology, I knew I wanted to help people, and the two just came together.
Awesome. And can you give us a layperson's description of what is anthropology?
Okay, so it's been interesting. I've been looking, because I've been in academia for so long, I've been looking at ways to explain it. So it's basically, anthropology is the study of humankind. That's the meaning of anthropology. And so there's 4 fields, which I won't go into at the moment, but basically it's about helping people understand the world by understanding other people and why other people live, why they live how they live, why they live the way they do, and do the things that they do. So it's just understanding and giving an appreciation into other people's lives, so that you can then, in my case, helping businesses to provide better services by understanding the people more.
Okay, so practically, what does that look like? Like, what kind of how would that look for a business?
Yeah, sure. So for basically for a business, how I look at it, I look at the consumers of a business. So the consumers can be either people that come into the store, people who buy things from a business, or it can be, in the case of a recent consult that I did with City of Melbourne, it can be an advisory committee that is looking at, that is responsible for looking at issues for people that influence the lives of people with disabilities in a particular area. So for me, it's about understanding what it is that's meant to be done, what it is that's being achieved, and what are the barriers that are preventing this from being achieved, and then providing insights and recommendations to ensure that the improvements can be made.
Yeah, awesome. So it's the way my head's kind of whirring around now is that there is a lot of attempts to do what you're describing, particularly in the diversity and inclusion field, but perhaps not with the same level of rigor and understanding about how we best collate information about those experiences. Would you say that that would be correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's still a big gap in in the disability, I guess, advocacy area. That's been going on for way back to the 1960s, and probably longer. But yeah, there's still a huge gap in the diversity and inclusion space. And we were having a conversation, you and I remember having a conversation about this last week, or a few weeks ago, because I was looking on LinkedIn at the diversity and inclusion space, and disability is something that's very, very, I guess, sparse compared to looking at gender, looking at, excuse me, looking at different cultures, etc. So yeah, it's a huge gap at the moment, I still think.
And yeah, we were having this conversation, and for me, it's been interesting to see how quite often the disability access and inclusion work sits quite separate from kind of diversity and inclusion strategy or work that goes on. And for a lot of people and professionals who work in this space, disability is seen as something, and I've had these feelings too, as something that I shouldn't touch because I don't know enough about. And so therefore it doesn't get included as it should in the broader diversity and inclusion strategies for an organisation. It sits aside, sometimes doesn't even occur, but in many organisations it sits in a separate group, essentially, or with separate responsibilities. Do you think that's helpful or harmful?
Well, I've been thinking about it because, there's this big quote in the disability area where it's nothing for us without us, and I think that's also applicable in other areas as well. And then so I think people have become scared of touching that area, and that's been a big thing, because people with disabilities, we are the ones who, if we've got the skills, we are the ones that should be doing that work. But we also need allies to help us do that work as well. And one of the big things is that over the years, people with disabilities haven't been paid for doing certain things. They're expected to volunteer our time. That's kind of been the norm. And so now it's just starting to be understood that people should be paid for their time for doing things. So, and this is, I think this is where there's a huge gap, and it's important this allyship issue gets addressed, because we need people like yourself talking about disability in a way that, like you do, you present what the barriers are, and you offer some conclusions, but you're always very much mindful of explaining, you know, that if you need to go to somebody with a disability to get the answers. And that's where I think people are scared to even go there, but that's what needs to happen. If there isn't somebody in your diversity and inclusion space who has a disability, you need to open up the gates to provide that information, and direct people towards finding someone with a disability that can further that education. I liken it to like cultural diversity. You wouldn't have a person like a white person. You wouldn't have a white person doing a cultural diversity and cultural awareness training. You have somebody from that particular culture doing it. And so it's the same with people with disabilities.
Yeah, no, that makes, that's exactly what I've been thinking over the last year. And it was one of the reasons I think you and I connected early on too, so that, it's about, I saw a lot of work around making sure that your networks are broader, so that you've got not just professional networks you can draw upon, but also in your friendship groups and your, more personal connections, that you have diversity in that. And we know that that's so important for us to understand different perspectives and bring different things to the work. And I think as diversity and inclusion professionals, it is even more important that we do that, so that we can be those allies in the situations that's needed, because quite often we will be in discussions about diversity and inclusion strategies and disabilities not getting mentioned. So as an ally in that space, we not only need to speak up, we need to know what to say, and we need to know who to bring in. And I
absolutely.
think that's incredibly important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I wanted to ask you a question, Bree. So, like, just going back to when I was discussing the anthropology side of things earlier, was that clear for you? I'm just wanting to.
Yeah.
I'm obviously working on that and trying to make sure that I can do that properly.
Yeah, no, it does, and it raises a whole lot of questions for me, because I've led a lot of research projects in the diversity and inclusion space, and anthropology is not something that I know intimately or have any real understanding of how the techniques are different, or how it's approached different than the types of focus groups and consultations that I've certainly undertaken in the past. And so connecting with you, it's been part of that, to learn how I can improve my practices and advocate for others to perhaps think a bit more holistically, because what we see a lot of in the diversity and inclusion space is, right, we need to know more about this problem, let's set up some focus groups, let's do a survey, which is all great and really valuable information, but I guess adding an extra level of rigor to that, to really ensure we do pull out the true experience of someone, and we're not asking the wrong questions, and we're not doing it in the wrong way. So
because with anthropology, focus groups and interviews and surveys, they're all part of the toolkit. But there's also ethnography, which is just ethnography is literally the study of cultures. So it's basically, studying, like, for example, a group of people with disabilities, so studying the culture of disability and then getting an understanding. So, it is just that extra layer. So it's interesting. People are actually kind of doing it already, but they don't realise that they're doing it. It's fascinating to watch. Even when I was doing a business course last year, coming across people that are actually doing it, and they didn't even realise they're doing it, and that excites me.
Yeah. But it's, I'm sure there's plenty for us to learn about how we do better. how we can really, as you say, draw on that, do that ethnography piece that perhaps we're not doing as well as we could be, and also I think asking the right questions is a real thing. I wanted to hear a little bit more about practically how you could be of value to a business. So let's pretend I'm, I don't know, a retail business or a service provider. Maybe I sell insurance. How could you be of value to me?
Okay, so all right, so for example, with a retailer, the way I would approach, if a retailer came to me and needed assistance, the way I would approach it is, okay, so as a retailer, there are 20% of Australians have a form of disability, and that's either invisible or visible. So a retailer, regardless of whether they realise it, they're going to have a consumer with a disability. So basically what I'm looking at is I would go ahead with, if the retailer came and said, yep, I want to get your business, what I would do is I would provide them. Let me just start again, because I have this habit of the ideas in my head just come out of words and I haven't actually formulated it properly. Oh, it's a huge habit that I have at home. Okay, so
intelligence.
Starting again. Okay, so if a retailer came to me, basically what I would do is create first of all a survey to find out who the consumers are that have disabilities, and because people with disabilities, as a person with a disability, complaining about things and wanting things to be improved can be very trying to think of the word, but people don't like to speak up because we've been so used to just putting up with how things are. So basically it'd be about advocating for the business, that the business wants to improve, wants to make sure that they're providing the best services that they can. And so therefore I would then be looking at the consumers, creating a survey to first gather information about what it is that the consumers think about the business and what they would like to see improved. And then I would do one-on-one interviews with the consumers. All of this would be confidential so that business doesn't know who the people are that are being interviewed. And then through those interviews and those surveys and even maybe focus groups, depending on the scenario, I would then gather insights and basically go through the information. I find one-on-one interviews I find I get much more information from those one-on-one interviews because they're a conversation, so they're not just asking a set list of questions. They're a conversation which draw out much more information and provide insights that neither I or the business would expect, and then providing those recommendations to the business to help them improve, because basically if you're looking at 20% of consumers with disabilities, that's going to be a huge profit margin for any business.
Absolutely. That's a significant market share, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, look, and this is not just for retailers, even though we're talking about retailers, everybody, regardless of the business that you're in, you're going to have that there will be people consuming your services in one way or another, and therefore those insights are important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I imagine it's, a lot of people would always think that if they were going to embark on this type of work, it's just going to be prohibitively expensive, because the first thing everybody thinks is you're going to have to put in a lift or a ramp or
yeah.
So yeah, tell us the types of things, the types of resolutions that people need to do, or that businesses find that they might need to do, that could actually increase accessibility.
Well, I mean, I can't go into it into too much, but like, for example, the last consulting that I did for City of Melbourne, it came up with a lot of insights that they didn't realise they hadn't even thought about certain things. And so because of those insights, are actually able to improve things going forward, to make, and in doing so, what they did, they made not just the job of the people concerned better, but in turn, that's going to help them ensure the lives of people with disabilities in the community are better as well, because it makes it more functional. More productive.
Yeah. So it's not the usual, everybody's minds go to these big expensive changes that need to happen, but quite often there's subtle things that, and it's like any diversity and inclusion work, isn't it? There's subtle things that can actually sometimes cost nothing that can really change the experience of someone.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, even for example, if it was a shop, accessibility isn't just about this physical, the physical things that we talk about. It's about the things that go on within the business and the experiences that people have. So those things that can change, and they don't cost anything.
Yeah, nice. I like it. So the one thing that I still wanted us to talk about before we kind of wrap up, we've got about 9 minutes left, is we had a conversation about and I know many people have had similar conversations about the increase in accessibility to workplaces that has occurred as a result of COVID and remote work and extra access to technologies, etc. Can you tell me maybe what have you seen have been the biggest positives to come from that, and what are your concerns as we hopefully start to move out of this, middle of the global pandemic?
Yeah, well, see, I work from home, so I'm lucky, but I guess so. First of all, when COVID hit, the amazing thing that I noticed was that remote work started to kick in, and remote work for people with disabilities, it's something that we've been fighting for a long time, and we were always told, no, it's too difficult, we can't do that. Like, for example, when I was talking about the time that I spent in the hospital years ago, that was actually would have added up to about 2 years of my life. So, and that's, at that time it was like I had to take time off work, couldn't do anything. And now I know, for example, that work went remote during COVID. So therefore we do have the option of doing things remote. Also talking at conferences with people with disabilities, conferences used to say, if you can't present at the conference, then, then basically too bad. And now conferences are accepting people being able to talk remotely. So it's opened up a lot of doorways that people said weren't possible, but suddenly, and this is the thing that frustrates me, I have to say it, it's because other people needed it who don't have a disability, it's suddenly doable, and that's just frustrating as hell for a person with a disability. But yeah, so going forward, I know, like, obviously offices are opening up again, so I'm lucky in that sense that I don't have that problem of having to go back into an office. But I worry that that's going to take away the remote options that people with disabilities had, and also remove job opportunities that have been open for the last 6 months.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just the disability community that is affected by this either, and we've seen such incredible accessibility for people who are primary carers or people who are carers of young children and of other members of their families or other people that they're caring for. We've seen a lot of benefits to come from this, and it would be a real shame to see that all disappear as
because even you and I, we were talking about a particular business networking group that, yeah, they've been enjoying the whole Zoom thing, but they've basically said once this is over, they'll be going back to normal, and then that excludes people like yourself and I, because we have things that mean that we can't actually go to the physical place necessarily at that times that they need or at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And the ability to do work currently is so much more enhanced for those of us who do have some restrictions to actually going to things in person.
Yeah.
And so, yes, it'd be great to see, a continuation of that. I think conferences online have actually been an amazing change. And I participated in the EON conference recently, the Equal Employment Opportunity Network, and there was more engagement in that day conference on Zoom than any in-person conference that I've attended, through the ability to have chat and the breakout rooms. And it's really powerful, and I hope many conference organisations take that to heart and continue to, capitalise on the incredibly increased numbers they're getting of people attending events, and the diversity that can attend.
Because even saying that, like the last anthropology conference I went to, had to miss on so much stuff because I had to go from A to B across all, like it was at Melbourne Uni, so across campuses. So even that, it cuts out all those issues.
Exactly. We've had somebody watching on live who says, agree that we don't just go back to normal, and they use this time to build a more inclusive and accessible way of working. And
absolutely.
Yeah, I think, that's what we'd definitely advocate for and like to see continue.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Ainslee, for coming on. I know it was a little last minute that you jumped on for me. I did have Sam Turner, who was going to come on today. She was unable to, but she's going to come on at a later time, so people watch out for that next one. Next week, we're actually going to be on a Wednesday, not a Tuesday. And this continues on with this idea of keeping things accessible and inclusive. One of the guests who's going to come on next week can't do Tuesdays because of care and responsibilities, so we're going to do a Wednesday. Hopefully that then gives a lot of other people opportunity to listen in live. But always remember, the replays are on my YouTube channel. They're also on my LinkedIn profile, but you can go to and subscribe to my YouTube channel and you'll get the replays each week. And within about 6 to 8 hours after the live event, the captions are available on YouTube too. So if you require the captions, that's the time to jump on and watch it. Thank you again, Ainslee, for coming on. It's been great. We might get you on another time because, there's so much depth to this conversation and the work that you do, and it's so valuable. How can people get in touch with you if they want to know more?
Yeah, so they can subscribe to my mailing list, which if they go to ainsleehooper.com.au, they'll be able to subscribe at the bottom of the page.
Beautiful.
And I'm also on social media, so yeah.
Yes, you are. And there's also, you've got a podcast, which
I do, yes.
Listening to on the treadmill last week, so it's
awesome.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. If you do want to sign up, as always, to my mailing list, you can head to my website there. I've got a free guide currently on how to engage your executives in your diversity and inclusion strategies. And I'm loving the feedback that I'm getting about this guide. So jump on, get your copy, and let me know what you think, because there's some things there that people have gone, great, I hadn't thought of that, and other things that people have gone, no way, this does not work. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts and your commentary about it. So please get in touch and download that guide, and I will catch you next week. Thanks, Ainslee. Bye, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.